If you want to protect your bees from skunks, bears, livestock, trespassers, whatever, you need to get an electric fence. If you're far away from electricity, you're going to have a solar charger. I, of course, have the Gallagher S100, and of course it's what I recommend. The S100 was recommended in the beginning for apiary protection. It used to be called the B100. S is what they call all their solar chargers, S for solar. So the S100 gives 1 joule of power, which is a lot of power for a solar charger. And since it's sent around Europe, it's a New Zealand company. Gallagher is the first company that has ever made an electric fence. Gallagher was a guy who had a horse called Old Joe who wouldn't leave his car alone, so he designed one little electric shock, and it worked. The horse never bothered the car again. Then he designed the electric fence. Anyway, he's the original maker, and they're still in business, so I got the Gallagher S100. Sold all around Europe, where they're very critical about their electrical output and their testing. So I liked it. I like it a lot. I had a Parmac. I didn't like that very much. The goats walked right through that. This Gallagher works. I'm telling you, it's a shocker. My goats got hit, touched it to their nose just one time, and they don't go close to it anymore. But I will say, an animal can smell if the electric fence is on or not. I don't know what it is. They have some kind of an electromagnetic field sensitivity, but they know when that electric fence is on or off. So if you have an electric fence set up around your apiary, one of the most important things, if you want the electric fence to work, you have to work. You can't be lazy. You've got to make sure that it's mowed. If you don't keep the electric fence mowed and clear of vegetation, it is not going to work. And if you're using poly wire like this, that's great. But if you're using the net wire, that's a lot of wire in that net wire. It's going to severely weaken your distance. You're not going to have a good shock on that stuff unless you have a short, small area. So you don't need the net wire. You just need a few wires like this. I've got 3 hot wires on there. 1 hot wire near the soil level, high enough away from the grass so that I can wait a while to mow. And I've got a cold wire above that. Then I've got 2 more hot wires on the top. You don't have to worry about them climbing. Nobody's going to climb an electric fence. You don't have to worry about them going under it if the soil level wire is pretty close to the soil, like this. Nothing's going under that. Nothing's going over that. The fence isn't even 3 feet tall, but it works. And skunks aren't going to go in there and bother my hives. No way. And it's got 1 joule. That's why the Gallagher's called the S100. That means 1 joule. Solar 1 joule. And 1 joule is what most of the states recommend for bear protection on an apiary or a camp. Most of your solar chargers are less than 1 joule. Grounding is extremely important. I use a lot of different kinds of metals in my ground rods. I've got rebar ground rods, copper ground rods, galvanized ground rods. I've got all kinds of ground rods, and they're all attached to that 1 wire around there, except the copper ground rod over there is attached to both the wire and the charger. But as far as the ground wire going, you don't have to worry about it. It can touch the metal rods. It can touch anything at once as long as it doesn't touch your live wire. Your live wires can't touch anything but the charger. That's why you have the yellow insulators. It doesn't have to make a complete circle around the hives or anything. It can go straight out one end and back. The way the fence works is by the animal touching the ground, the soil, and touching the wire. Now, if the soil is dry, it won't work very well. That's why you should also have a ground wire. This is what I mean. This wire right here is a ground wire. See that wire there? Got my brass rod touching it. Now if I touch, hang on a second. This thing really gives a zap and I don't want to get shocked. There's that. Now, you see? Hang on. It's lighting up. See all the way to the top. That's 5,000, no, that's 8,000 volts. And it's getting that 8,000 volts just because it's touching that wire. That means it doesn't have to touch the ground during a drought. But since I'm not having a drought, even if it walks up on the ground, I'm going to get a nice mighty zap all the way up. This tester is a Patriot from Atwood's. It only cost $13.99. I had to tape the brass ground rod to it better, because this little brass ground rod here, it falls off. It don't fall off anymore, thanks to a couple of cents worth of electrician's tape. But I think this is a good little charger for a good little tester for $13.99. And I have less than 450 bucks invested in the entire fence. And it's well worth it, considering how many beehives I had knocked over by goats and wild pigs and winds and all that. But the fence has really helped me. And I just like having peace of mind knowing that nothing's going to knock over my hives and destroy them. And that's all you got to do. You just got to make sure that you've got it about 3 foot off the ground so that's at nose level. What you want the animal to do is touch its nose to it. When it does, it's going to say, ow. It's going to run the other direction. If you see that little plastic mat I got underneath all my hives, that's important for the hive beetles. Because when the hive beetle falls out of the hive, I want it to get eaten before it hits the ground. And I got lizards, and under there you see there's a turtle. There's a turtle in there that eats bugs. He's in there looking for things to eat. It's easy for them to find the larva this way. They don't just make it straight to the ground. The lizards get them, the birds get them. Probably a lot more things, like maybe even small snakes. So that's what I do. I keep the mat. Anyway, these little posts are very cheap. They were $1.99. So the whole thing, very, very inexpensive. $4.50 for everything, including the Energizer. And I think the Gallagher S100 is the best charger you can get to watch your bees. Yeah, I mean it. Watch your bees. That's what it does. Okay, that's all I need to tell you. And even over here, you want to test your fence in different locations. Well, let's see how she works. Does that look like it's all 5 lit up? That's 8,000 volts. 8,000 volts. It's pretty good, 8,000 volts. That'll do it. That'll do it. And you want to test all the wires. Make sure they're all working. I'd say they're all working. 8,000 volts. The only thing you're not going to get a test on is the bare wire. See, that's my ground wire right there. There's no charge on that. And that's necessary. Anyway, this thing gets quite a zap, so it works. And I know it works because I've seen it in action. But you got to make sure and keep that vegetation off that fence line. If there's any vegetation on that fence line, even a twig, anything on that fence line, it's not going to work. So you gotta take care of things. You really got to do a lot of work to keep the fence working. You can't neglect the yard work. And if you do that, you're protected. Can't be lazy with a solar charger or an electric fence. You can't. You've got to be diligent at your work. Okay?